morning and welcome to this special edition of Left, Right and Centre. I'm Nidhi Razdan. My guest today has been a close friend of India's for many years. He's been a former ambassador to India, a former member of the US Congress and 9/11 Commissioner. And now he's a strategic consultant with APCO Worldwide. I'm happy to welcome back to Delhi Ambassador Tim Roemer. Ambassador Roemer, welcome back.
Thank you. Nice to be back in India.
Well, you're here at this time in India when we're seeing these escalating tensions between India and Pakistan, Ambassador, and I'm sure it gives you a sense of deja vu because you've seen this entire ups and downs in the relationship. Do you think that the world today understands India's position vis-a-vis terrorism that emanates from Pakistan much more than it did, say, even 5 years ago?
Well, first of all, let me start by just saying that the people of the United States strongly condemn these attacks. Our prayers, our thoughts are with not only the Indian people, but the soldiers, their families. I think Mr. Modi reaching out right away to show the government and the people's support of these families is absolutely the right first step. There'll be other steps, but this is certainly the right first step. Now, you mentioned in your question about how this brings me back to thinking about the relationship when I came here. I remember the first discussion I had with President Obama in 2008 when he decided to appoint me to this great prestigious job as U.S. Ambassador to the people of India. One of his first instructions was, in light of these tragic, horrific attacks in Mumbai, which was the Indian people's version of our 9/11, how do we build bridges? How do we increase the depth and the strategic nature of the relationship between the United States and India so that, one, this doesn't happen to India again, two, that we better protect our homeland in the United States, and three, we send a message to Pakistan that these kind of things cannot happen in the future, that they risk the stability of Southeast Asia and South Asia, that they risk the growth and the jobs in the Indian economy, and that they are, as we've reflected recently in the joint statement between the United States and India after the strategic dialogue, that the United States and India are increasingly very close partners in going after safe havens of terrorism, in trying to form a partnership on defense intelligence sharing to make the world safer together, working hand in hand, United States and India, and that this is a very difficult problem post-Arab Spring and something that our presidential election our candidates in this presidential election are going to be talking about more and more.
I will come to that. Having said that, and we certainly do see much more American support for India's position. We do see stronger statements of support and a greater degree of frustration in the US Congress as well over military aid to Pakistan and so on. And yet somehow there is a feeling here in India as well that the US could do more, but its hands are tied. Is that a fair assessment?
I don't think that's an accurate assessment of 2016. It might be of 2006, but let's think about, let's remind your viewers about how dramatically we've seen this relationship, the United States position in this part of the world shift. Certainly when I served on the 9/11 Commission, coming out of the 2001 attacks on the United States where 3,000 people were brutally murdered in our country, we started thinking as policymakers back in the 2002-2003 time frame, how do we use the powers and the levers of the United States, both the carrots and the sticks, to change behavior in Pakistan? We knew that Afghanistan and Pakistan were kind of the center of Al-Qaeda, Haqqani Network, Lashkar-e-Taiba, and other groups that were using land and using resources there to strike and inflict terror on different parts of the world. Many of us at that point said, even as a precursor to this Obama legacy pivot or rebalance to Asia in 2008, 2009, we were saying, how do we change the relationship between the United States and Pakistan so that we remain friends with Pakistan, but they concentrate on this internal threat that is increasingly threatening their own state and their own stability and their own people. So you've seen this dramatic shift, the United States concentrating more and more on just a few things with our relationship with Pakistan, and on all kinds of different, unlimited different prospects with the people of India. Space, economics,
the relationships are completely different.
Intelligence, CT,
Absolutely.
all kinds of exercises between
But
the two
let me
countries.
ask you, Ambassador, in the wake of this latest attack, India has all options on the table at the moment. Certainly diplomatically, that's already being exercised, and India is going on the offensive diplomatically. India's foreign minister will speak at the United Nations on Monday. But what if India was to exercise a military option? How would the United States see that at this time?
Well, look, your previous question talked about how much the relationship has changed, and I want to reiterate that. We've seen the Congress change over the last decade or 15 years. Now you have in the United States Congress, in the Senate and the House, the U.S.-India caucus,
That's right.
which is the largest caucus in both bodies. Both of those bodies very strongly in favor of increasing the ties and the strategic partnership between the United States and India. At the same time, we see members of Congress restricting that relationship with Pakistan, trying to focus Pakistan more and more on, you need to concentrate on your own internal instability, on your economic problems, on making sure that you're not using strategic depth in Afghanistan or India against U.S. interests or Indian interests. So we've seen that dramatically change in the last 15 years. We've also seen the Indian-American diaspora grow as a political power in the United States, which is again showing that the United States is more and more in favor of making sure that we're friends with both Pakistan and India, but you've seen how dramatically those relationships have changed.
So in other words, are you saying, and that's my last question on this, that if India was to exercise a limited military option, that in a sense the US would understand that India has this option on the table?
Well, look, I think, as I said before, Mr. Modi, the Indian people, the Indian government is being, I think, thoughtful, deliberative, international in terms of looking at this. They're looking at the medium to long term as well as the short term on this. How do they surgically make sure they calibrate what they want to do to get justice, to get fairness for what happened up in Uri? This is very important to look at India's overall strategic and geopolitical interests, not just seeking revenge, not just seeking an eye for an eye, looking at building relationships over time to ensure that they're secure, to protect their people from terrorism, to work with the United States to make sure Pakistan does not allow this to happen in the future.
So you seem to be advising caution. You seem to be saying that it should be, there should be no knee-jerk reaction, that there should be some caution and reflection on what the medium to long term impact would be.
Look, I'm saying the United States is the first country in the world, when we're hit, to make sure that justice and fairness prevails, that we make sure that those responsible pay a price at the right time, in the right way, and that we don't do damage to our reputation and our interests overall. Look how long it took us to get back and find bin Laden, but bring him to justice.
So in other words, the U.S. would understand India's position, whatever.
I think I'm being clear that things have changed dramatically over the last 10 or 15 years, that the United States, through the last joint statement with India, talked about making sure that our two countries are working together to make the world safer from terrorism. We said things about bringing to justice those that had executed the Mumbai attacks in 2008, and that continues to be a top concern for the United States of America, and that we would work together on eliminating safe havens wherever they exist. Those are all very powerful statements by the United States to work with
I think
India.
you're absolutely right, and what you're saying is very, very significant. And that brings me then to the U.S. presidential race, Ambassador, and you made a mention of that as well. In India, of course, we're watching it with great fascination. The whole world is. On national security and international security matters first, linking all of these. what would a President Trump mean for international, the fight against terrorism internationally?
Well, that is a great question, and I hope the debates will flesh out and educate the American people about both Mr. Trump and Secretary Clinton's views, from how do they address this disaffection and anger from the middle class across America, the working people. They're angry about certain things, whether that be the cost of college education, whether that be a fractured democracy that's not listening and representing some of their views, or whether that's the complicated set of world politics. How do we try to put pressure on Pakistan to do more about their internal terrorism threat? How do we work with a rising China to make sure that they're not pushing neighbors around in places like the South China Sea? What do we do post-Arab Spring? How do we work with coalitions around the world, not just on terrorism, but on the radical recruitment of terrorism
Absolutely.
on the internet? These are all very important questions that I hope our debates, I hope our media will help educate and bring forward answers for the American people.
It's interesting how the race is poised at the moment. I was in the US exactly a year ago, and at that time people were laughing at the prospect of a Trump nomination and saying, he'll be out of the race by January, it's over. But here we are, and he could very well be President Trump. How much of a realistic chance do you think he has to be president?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball on any of this, but I was smart enough 6 or 8 months ago to tell friends and colleagues
Not
and
to write him
people,
off.
don't write Trump off, not only for the Republican nomination, but that in this kind of mood in America, with this kind of anger and disaffection, that he has a chance. This is a change election in 2016. 2008, with Mr. Obama, it was all about hope and change and optimism. 2016, it's about rage and revolt. It's about who can be the agent and the advocate for making Washington work and listening to some of the concerns of the disaffected and the downtrodden and the
very
angry.
anti-establishment.
Absolutely. People don't think their democracy is listening to them. When you do polls of the working middle class, 53% of them feel like the government's not representing their views, and over 80% feel like government ignores them and could do a much better job at representing what they need to have.
So you wouldn't
happen.
write him off from winning this election?
I think this is going to be an extremely close election in the Electoral College and in the popular vote. I think the advantages probably go to Secretary Clinton at this point. She has the advantage of the Electoral College, which with the Obama coalition of 2008 and 2012 seems to, with the demographics, slightly favor her, as well as some of these key swing states. Secondly, I think the advantage goes to her in terms of the get out the vote, the technology, those things passed on by President Obama and developed by his campaign teams, if she gets access to that information and technology.
And yet you believe it's going to be close. That's
and
interesting.
yet it's going to be close. He is connecting to disaffected people. He is articulating change, but not solutions. And we hope in the debates that he's going to be very specific. What are these solutions to fix government? What are the solutions to help somebody get access to college or vocational school? What are the solutions to immigration without building walls to bring in some of the best talent around the world to America, something we've always done and always welcomed?